The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of CNS Channel 6.
Hi, good afternoon, viewers, and welcome to Matters of Public Importance, right here on Channel 6. And I'm yours, Gail Teixeira, representing the Parliamentary Opposition and the People's Progressive Party. This program, as you know, focuses on matters of public importance, bring you information, discussions on issues and matters that are concerned to you, the Guyanese public, every Thursday between 12:30 and 1:30, right here on Channel 6. Before we get into the meat of the program, as usual, the numbers are 225-0010 and 225-0008. Remember, if the numbers are blocked, I can't take the call. And so today is October 31st. 4 days more for you to make your claims by November the 4th, or objections before November the 11th when it closes. Again and again, I keep explaining to you about the process of claims and objection, and it's very important if you wish to vote on Election Day, March the 2nd. And so if any of you are still confused, please feel free to call these numbers that the People's Progressive Party have publicized, where you can get advice, you can get your name checked to see if it's on the PLA, etc. 231-1133, 231-1148, and 231-5401. For those of you in WhatsApp, you could also call 611-772. 7772. Okay, I'll repeat that during the program in case you didn't manage to get it this time round. But it's very important for you to check your name on the voters list. It's on the GCOM website. You can check, put in your ID card number, and it'll pull up which division you're in, your name, etc. And make a note on a little piece of paper, put it near the phone or put in your wallet or purse of what division you're in. If you're in 722-222-32A, you write that down because that will guide you when you have to go to find your polling station. So it's very important to do that. If you haven't found your name on the list, feel free to call the numbers I gave you and or to go into the GCOM center nearest you to make a claim. All right? If you've moved residence, of course, it is important for you to be able to make a transfer. Don't worry if anybody tells you if you're from Berbice and now you're living in Georgetown that you have to go all the way back to Berbice. That's not true. Wherever you're living, say in Georgetown, the nearest GCOM center, you go in with your ID or your birth certificate. If you're now making a new registration, if you're transferring your ID card, and you give them the address of where you're living now, they will then have to come and verify that that's where you're living. For those who are Commonwealth citizens, of course, having lived here for a year legally, they're allowed to register as voters. And of course, you must be 18 years of older by the time December 31st, 2019. And so it's important for women who have got married, they can choose to leave their name on the list in their maiden name, or they can go to the GCOM center nearest to them with a copy of their marriage certificate, and the name would then be this would be a change of name on the PLE. It would not be in any way interfering with your name on the PLE. But it would put you under your married title if that's what you want. For women who are divorced or they're widowed, they could take in in the case of divorce, take in their copy of their absolute from the court, and then they can change back to their maiden name if on the PLE they were going by their married title. For those of you who regrettably are widows, then you take in the death certificate to show that you are now a widow and you can revert your name on the PLE to your maiden name. And it's your desire, it's your wish, it's not compulsory. So those are just some quick things I wanted to share with you. GCOM, as of October 29th, announced that since they started the claims and objection, new registrants were 3,924. Transfers, these are people making transfers, 9,516. Changes to their particulars, whether it's in the PLE, like what I gave you, name change, 1,672. A number of people had to retake their photographs, 472, and those who had to replace their ID cards, 1,627. So this is not a large number of people who have gone to the centers. Some centers have sat there sometimes all day doing nothing because people aren't coming in. And so this is the latest data from GCOM. Since we last met, the GCOM chair made two decisions that will have very far-reaching consequences for our country and our people. The first one, GCOM decided that they are persons who have not uplifted their ID cards will be removed from the official list of electors for March 2nd, 2020 elections, but that the names will be kept on the National Registration of Registrars. Bizarre. GCOM claims that there are 20,000 cards not uplifted, many dating back to the 2008 house-to-house registration, but also including up to the last continuous registration claims and objection in 2018. These have not been uplifted. So no one in the public has seen a breakdown, nor have we in the PPP seen a breakdown by region of how many cards remain not uplifted. GCOM stated that people have 21 days to uplift these cards, or that their names will be taken off the OLE, which means their names are already now on the PLE, and the GCOM will be removing those names when they extract the list for the official list of electors, which will be used on March 2nd, 2020. No date was given by GCOM for the commencement of the 21 days. Was it on when we read it in the press? Is it yesterday? Is it today? When does the 21 days start? They, of course, said, too, they would be writing people and giving them time to come in. Of course, I reported in the last program, and the last two programs actually, the difficulties of people picking up their ID cards in the interior. And GCOM has an obligation when they go out on these mobiles to carry cards from those areas so to help the interior people out. As I gave an example the last time, if you're in Cuyuni and you are registered in the claims objection in the claims objection continuous registration in May to July 2018, how do you get your card? Because the nearest GCOM office is at Camarang, which is completely a different direction. To get your card, if you're in the Cuyuni area, you have to fly to Georgetown and then fly in to Camarang. What GCOM is supposed to be doing, and I think they've been doing it unevenly, I don't think they've been doing it in all cases, that they've been going out and taking the cards. They're going to an area at Bang, they're going to Joala, they're going to Parima, they're going to Isinera, whatever. They carry the cards for persons who are registered from those areas to see if they're there, if they can give them there. Of course, as I said, this has been done unevenly by GCOM across the country. Now let's look at the matter to do with the ID cards in more detail. In Guyana, the registration of citizens, 14 years and over, and the management of elections are both done by the Guyana Elections Commission. In many countries, these functions are separated, being executed by two completely different agencies. For example, in Barbados, one's civic registration is done by a different body than the body that deals with the elections. The latter, this is the elections body, once election is called, is provided with a list that is generated by their registration agency of all those who are 18 and over by the qualifying date for the elections. Their election body does not produce the list of electors in the sense the list of registrants. They produce a list of electors. So what the registration agency does, completely separate, is people can walk in any time and get their registration done, get whatever ID card you get or document you get in Barbados, and those names are added to the list. So when the Barbadian government decides to have elections, the election body signals they need a list. That list is generated from the registration body of those who would be eligible to vote. That list is then put up for scrutiny by the voters and anybody else. So that this is an important distinction, because in Guyana, and I personally believe, that's my personal belief, that this is something we in Guyana should think about, segregating the registration of citizens for registration purposes and the commission, the election management, the management of elections. So that the whole issue of the list becomes a completely different issue. People continuously register, the list is updated continuously, and when elections are generated and called, the list is generated by the registration body and given to GCOM. In the past, under the PNC, it was the Ministry of Home Affairs that was the registration, that it dealt with registration of citizens and giving out ID cards. I'm not proposing that at all. I'm talking about a completely different agency covered by law and a whole process of appointments. So that the issue in Barbados is very different than here. And that explains why in 1 month, 2 months, they can call elections. Why in the UK, with a population of 70 million, and I think about 50 million voters, the Prime Minister Johnson can announce that he believes elections will be held on December the 12th. What is that, about 6 weeks away from now? They can do it. They can do it in the UK, based on a different system of registration of voters. They use it through local authorities based on your taxation. So when you move into a local authority, you are taxable with rates and taxes. That list is what generates and produces the voters list in a variety of ways. So each country, different countries have different mechanisms. No country is like Ghana that seems to have this perpetual agony and angst over the production of a list of voters. As I said, in Guyana, all the examples I've given, this is not the case. Here, GCOM is also responsible for registration of all persons over the age of 14. And this happened because of the lack of trust in the Ministry of Home Affairs under the PNC with rigged elections controlling that. And so it was given to what was supposed to be Election Commission, which over the 20-odd years was thought to be independent and made enshrined in the Constitution and in law. This function of the of the registrations of all persons over the age of 14 and above, allows GCOM to issue national ID cards used for people's daily business in our country. So from banking and purchasing, identification for all sorts of business with government agencies, private sector, admission to health facilities, etc., it is also responsible for the registration and management of all elections and produces a list of elections and issues the national ID card. So in GCOM, it is the mega body. The ID card issuance is part of the GCOM civic registration process, not part of the electoral process. The fact that a national ID card is not required for voting is an important issue to remember, especially since the inclusion of biometrics in the process of registration of all persons 14 years and over. When this was introduced, when we brought in the whole issue of continuous registration and the inclusion of biometrics in 2006-2008, fingerprinting, photographs, and the registration. And so fingerprinting is an important issue because when you are registered, they fingerprint you. What they're supposed to do is cross-match your fingerprints against the entire database to see if there are any duplicates. If there's a duplicate, then they have to come and find the persons, make them do over their fingerprints and process them again by scanning. Now, I'm not sure how much of this is being done by GCOM at this point, but the database always has to be run against the entire database, not parcels of it. This means, therefore, that there's something called a folio for each registrant, which includes their photograph and fingerprints. Each presiding officer at each polling station has the folio on each voter on that list for that station. So you're going to Ramakrishna and you're in the A section. You go, there's a list there that has all the people that have to vote in that area. And so you go in, if you have your ID card, you present it. If you don't, you have a passport, you present it. If you don't have either, you go to the person and say, I am so-and-so. The presiding officer has to make sure that that name is on the list, first of all. Then she will open her folio, her documents, and look for your photograph. Each person has a sheet with a photograph on it, each voter. And so They would look and they say, oh, yes, you're Gail Teixeira, you look like Gail Teixeira. Yes, you can vote. So the folio is an alternative. The folio was also created at each station to have what is part of the registration process documents be held by the presiding officer. So in case of where there's a doubt of the identity of the person, it could be checked against the photograph that the presiding officer has. The polling agents who sit in the polling station, whether they're 2, 3, 4, 5, have to share one folio, one file with the folio of each voter on the list. So any polling agent can say, wait, I don't think it looks like Gail Teixeira. I'd like to look at the folio. Can you give me a minute? I want to see it better. And so they can look and say, oh yeah, it does look like her. Or no, it doesn't. There's someone else named that way. And so, therefore, if you don't have a passport or you don't have an ID card, you can present yourself to the presiding officer and he or she must check your folio. And if the person looks like the person on the list, then you are allowed to vote. If a polling agent is dissatisfied and says, no, I know Gail Teixeira, and that doesn't look like her at all, as a fake, the presiding officer have to decide what to do. And so normally, if there's a protest and the person says, look, I personally know this person, they may set it aside and ask someone who can vouch for the person who's voting before them and sign an oath so that if it is found they lied, they can be charged under offenses in the National Registration and Electoral Laws of Guyana. Dr. Serge Bally in the 2015 elections, in the face of thousands of voters not uplifting their cards, allowed people to vote without ID cards, recognizing that folios provided in law, the folios are provided in law, allow scrutiny of anyone coming to vote at a polling station in the absence of an identification. Same Dr. Serge Bally said, while commenting on the fact that more than 43,000 ID cards were not uplifted, he said, and I quote, stressed that the cards were not voting cards and the requirement to vote was to be registered, not possession of an ID card, end quote. Please note, my dear friends, there was no protest by the APNU AFC coalition nor any political party when Serge Bally made this pronouncement on the eve and on the election of May 2015. So why is GCOM taking what is such a retrograde step and an unlawful one? It is absolutely unlawful. Clearly it is the PNC APNU AFC who wants to disenfranchise thousands of voters. And it seems as if the chair does not appreciate the electoral process in Guyana that we have to obey. Back in August, Chief Justice Roxanne George ruled that persons cannot be removed from the voters list unless they're dead or otherwise disqualified to vote under Article 159, 2, 3, or 4, something I believe the chairman needs to be reminded of. But let's go back to the Constitution, what the Chief Justice referred to. Article 159 requires a voter to be what? 18 at the time of the election, to be Guyanese, or a Commonwealth citizen resident here legally for 1 year. Three things. On what grounds can a voter be disenfranchised? They're under 18, number one. They're not Guyanese, number one, and they're not from any Commonwealth country, number two. So that's 2 and 3. If the person is certified mentally insane, and that means that has to go through the court, and the person is certified and sent to Fort Kanchi. This is not someone who has a mental illness, by the way. These are persons who are certified through the action of the court, the judiciary, that they're sent to Fort Kanchi. And the fourth one is a person who is imprisoned, so that prisoners are not allowed to vote. And of course, the last one, which is obvious, dead. But only dead with a death certificate. So you could be dead, a person could be dead on the list. But if there's no one who can bring a death certificate, say the person's dead, then that name remains on the list. No, there's nothing in the constitutional law that says that the voter must have an ID card to vote. This decision of GCOM is so fraught with danger that it's almost unspeakable in the enormity of its consequences on this country and our people. And I repeat that. It is so fraught with danger that it's almost unspeakable in the enormity of its consequences on our nation and our people. There are two theories why this action has been so strenuously fought for by the government-appointed commissioners, and one by the chairman's decision. One, to create a situation or basis for challenging the results of the election, and two, to disenfranchise thousands of voters to shift the balance of votes in their favor. Remember, they won office by 4,526 votes, less than 1% difference between the APNU, AFC, and the PPP. If they can succeed in disenfranchising thousands of voters, especially PPP sympathizers and supporters, through this edict to do with the ID cards, they hope to have a better chance of winning the elections. But the first, that is, creating a situation to challenge the results of the election, seems to be more viable, as there are PNC supporters on the list who have not collected their ID cards as well. And certainly, why would they want to disenfranchise many of their own supporters? Most of the GCOM mobiles in the country have almost been completed in the claims and objection period for the interior. So thousands of voters have no idea that they are at risk at being disenfranchised through their not collecting their ID cards. The second decision is to publish the names of 370,000 persons who were registered in the house-to-house campaign exercise, which was aborted in September following this Chief Justice ruling. The chair said she had made this decision since September, so that it should come as no surprise. Well, all of us were caught surprised. If that is the case, if she made this decision since September, why didn't she publish the list at the time of the commencement of the claims and objection period? Why wait until it's almost finished by publishing it on October the 26th? No one has any idea of what will happen to these lists. Will they take them down on November the 11th, or will they remain up, and for what purpose? Does one make a claim or objection based on a list that is unlawful, as there's no provision for any other list than the PLE and the OLE? And of course, immediately when this happened, the PPP put out a press release pointing this out and made it very clear that this was a very dangerous move. It says that the house-to-house registrants list published by GCOM is replete with errors, confirming our suspicions about the process from its inception. There are thousands of names duplicated on the PLE and thousands of persons who are under the age of voting of 18. Our investigations have found, too, that dozens of persons listed as new registrants cannot be found in the addresses listed, and this is a serious cause for concern, fueling the worry that there are many non-existent persons on the list published by GCOM. This is the list they published and was put up in stations by GCOM on Saturday. This is the 370,000 names of persons from the house-to-house exercise. Further, the house-to-house registrants list is not a supplementary list to the PLE and cannot be used during a claims and objection period. There is no provision in the laws of Canada to authorize the publication of a duplicate list that does not originate from the National Register of Registrants database. That is to say, the house-to-house registrants have no place in our legal architecture. The latest development strengthens the PPP's position that the house-to-house registration was flawed, and any attempt to merge the data from the process with an NRRDB will contaminate and comprise the database. The PPP, People's Progressive Party, calls on GCOM to immediately withdraw the house-to-house registrant list and continue with the ongoing claims and objection exercise. Most, as I said, this is a very serious development because, of course, alternatively, in addition to that, GCOM has not posted this list of 370,000 names on their website, and they know why they can't do it. It's illegal. It's unlawful. They can't put an alternative list, which has no basis in law, on their website. And so What are those lists doing there? They're not at all throughout the country. They're put up at centers. People have to go to them to find if they're there or not. And in fact, as you know, if the chairman wanted there to be public scrutiny, why was it not made public by some website? Why was the PPP, a political party, given a copy of the 370,000 names from the House to House on Tuesday, October the 29th, 4 days after the lists were posted up, and following repeated requests from Saturday by our chief scrutineer to Chief Elections Officer Lowenfield? I'm telling you, my dear friends, there is mischief afoot in GCOM, and so we must be vigilant and ensure that we check the list, make claims to be registered, make corrections, make transfers, uplift ID cards, make objections to the list, for example, of dead and underage. Even the leader opposition yesterday had to go and do a transfer as he was on a list at a previous address. And I want to just pause here. If you don't believe what I'm telling you, I'd like you to listen to the leader opposition, Mr. Barjagdale, at his press conference yesterday. I'm just using a clip from it which deals with the issue of ID cards and the GCOM house-to-house list.
That's the only way you can collect your share of the oil money. And that's the new level of desperation. And secondly, that's the only way you will get a national identification card. We have heard this in many places. I got some people to tape it. And the second issue, another manifestation of this desperation and a recognition that it would be difficult to rig the elections given international scrutiny, given polling day activities that we intend to participate in with our toughest polling agents to ensure that there is no shenanigan on that day, that they're attempting to either disenfranchise people, large swathes of people, hoping it would change the electoral arithmetic, or creating, and I think the second is more likely, creating the basis for a legal challenge after the elections. Knowing that a very potent area, or an area that has already seen an election overturned in the past, identification for voting. So, and I'm talking about Claudette Singh's ruling in the past when she vitiated the elections on the basis of their voters' ID. It was not a requirement for people to vote. So I believe that what you see from APNU commissioners now is the preparation of the ground. They have their instructions from Congress base. Try as much as possible to disenfranchise people within the GCOM machinery, but that will be difficult to do. Failing which, prepare the grounds for a legal challenge after the elections. And so this is the latest manifestation of these acts of desperation. The proposal by the APNU commissioners to strike off the name of the voters from the national, from the OLE, the official list of electors, if they do not pick up their ID cards. Now, this is patently illegal. Illegal. And I will take you through the issue. So we heard the justification for this, and from the Chronicle. The Chronicle article, I think October 30th, says that at a previous meeting, Commissioner Vincent Alexander had explained, it's like an objection. So the issue is not their ID card, the issue that these persons, since 2008 and beyond 2008, have not in any way presented themselves to be present, to be known, to be alive, to be existing, and to be resident. And in calling them, writing to them gives us the opportunity to make a determination. Now, if you have to file an objection, you can do so in the claims and objection period. Why doesn't APNU file an objection to people's names? That would be a legal route to take. If they want, they have the remaining period, almost 10 days, over 10 days, to file objections. They have so far filed less than 100 objections to people's names. But Vincent Alexander wants to remove them through a backdoor illegal process rather than going through the statutory process of filing objections to names on the list. If you file an objection, that means GCOM is required to follow a process, and the process can result in the person being removed from the voters list. But you cannot file an objection on the basis that the person, you can't find the person, or the person is not resident in Guyana, because the Chief Justice has already ruled on that issue. So it is a backdoor illegal way of addressing this issue. So that is Vincent Alexander, his justification for doing this. So he wants GCOM illegally to do the work of the APNU. Secondly, I saw Mr. Corbyn saying, he's also informed the media that the names of these individuals will not be removed from the National Register of Registrants, stating, it would only mean that if these persons exist, they may miss this round of elections.
Thank you very much for our technician. We had a little glitch. I hope you were able to hear all of it, but I'm glad that we were able to get it to you. Remember, and as Mr. Jagder was talking about, the process that you have to go through, and the process they would allow for APNU AFC to make objections, to make claims, etc. And I want to remind you that it is no other than Mr. Granger who said in March that there were 200,000 incorrect entries on the list, and that is why he wanted a new house-to-house exercise. Remember, he's been the only person who has said that. Nobody else has said that. Not even his own party people have been able to come to the fore to show anything relating to these 200,000 incorrect entries. So why hasn't the PNC APNU AFC put in objections, corrections over the last few weeks? Or are they planning to do what they did in 2001? Drop 20,000 names they were objecting to 2 days before objections came to an end. We had to find thousands of people who they claim were dead or overseas and take people physically to GCOM centers, as well as taking affidavits to stop this dastardly plot of the PNC. Are they planning to do it again? Well, we stopped them in 2001 and we'll stop them again. We're seeing now today a new Granger version of what they did in 2001 taking place. Now we're taking thousands of people, or intending to take thousands of people off the list who didn't collect their ID cards, and hoping in GCOM that the names on the house-to-house registration will be incorporated into the OLE. As I said, we have no idea of what the chairman meant by putting the list up for public scrutiny. For what purpose? Because you cannot go into any GCOM center and say, I noticed my name on the house is spelled wrong or it's at the wrong place. I'd like to make a correction. You will not be allowed to. GCOM can only deal with the PLE. As I said, mischief is afoot, and we, the Guyanese voters, must be vigilant at all times. There are important statutory processes imposed by law to safeguard the integrity of the OLE. This is the official list of electors, and vital to the delivery of credible elections. Instead of working out the details of these important processes and making them public, the government commissioners continue to pursue mechanisms to contaminate, pervert, and illegitimize the electoral machinery. If we in Guyana become a little paranoid whenever our elections are coming, it must be appreciated by onlookers and outsiders. We've had a lot of experience. Probably for the entire region, hemisphere, Western Hemisphere, we are the country that has most experienced rigged elections. We lived in rigged elections from 1968 to 1985, rigged referendum in 1978, violence after elections in 1992, 97, 2001, 2011. Non-compliance with the Constitution for over 10 months by the President following a no-confidence motion, and now these interventions by GCOM. We may be said to have a right to be a bit paranoid, so please be patient with our paranoia. It is what has saved us to protect democracy and our right to vote in our country. But constant vigilance and guarding of our right to vote is sacrosanct. We have been advised that Madam Chair of GCOM will be meeting the press on November 8th to give her first press conference, I believe. Regrettably, this is after the claims objection period is finished, at least the claims period is finished, and when the decisions have all been made and done in relation to the house-to-house and the ID cards. What is interesting is the day after GCOM published the list, Granger had an interview on October 27th with Gordon Mosley. Now, he spoke with about 11 or 12 things, and so I'll skip most of those. But his track record, his confidence in retaking support in traditional bases, corruption, which he glossed over completely. In fact, he said, I am against corruption personally. I'm confident that my government is against corruption, and goes on to say that there have been improvements. That, you know, that to the extent that this is corrupt, that there is corruption, he said, to the extent that there's trafficking persons, to the extent that it's smuggling or contraband activities, these are other forms of corruption. We expect that there's going to be better enforcement in years to come. It is nothing sudden, but the changes are visible. I'm seeing the changes, Mr. Granger says. And then, of course, he talks about confidence in the traditional support of the PNC. And he says, my supporters understand me. They know I understand them very well. That's why I'm here to serve them. I spent a long time studying what their needs and ensuring that my ministers understand what their needs are. I understand very well, and I will continue to provide them with the services that they need. This is his comment on his traditional base, but let's go to how he describes himself, because that's a contradiction. He describes himself. He says, when he talks about Irfan Ali as his competitor, he says, what I'm trying to say is that Mr. Ali represents a different mindset. He has a different ideology. I represent, please note, an inclusive ideology. I represent bringing people from all of the geographic regions. I'm the one who sets up these 4 towns to serve the people. I'm the one running a 6-party coalition. Isn't that funny? Inclusive ideology? I think a lot of us, and many have spoken already. So he has a statement where how he's going to take care of his party people, and then he says that his ideology is inclusiveness. And then you look at his government will recognize, and the PSs and the REOs will understand that it is not exclusive. This is the president that has been exclusive and has marginalized and alienated the majority of people of this country, even including his own supporters, And I do believe that he's overestimating the power of his persuasion with his own supporters. And of course, crime. What did the gentleman have to say about crime? He said, crime situation is not as bad as some people make out. Well, guys, there you have it. And then he refers, of course, he lives in a time warp of the troubles of the 2002-2008 period. So his whole concept of crime and security is based on that. And he lives in that time warp as if nothing else matters. Nothing else matters today, right now, and what is happening to the Guyanese people do with crime. And of course, he goes into his long thing about Roger Khan as well. Unfortunately, they have no evidence because it has now been proven they've lied. They lied to the Guyanese people for all those almost 20 years on this issue. So, but what is interesting, how he describes himself. He's clearly, and the question that was asked is about Roger Khan, but he answers it. He says, I'm a lawful president. Now, really? Lawful when you've defied the Constitution for 10 months and your cabinet has still not resigned? But he's a lawful president, so you must believe what he says, because he's Granger, after all. I'm also bound by laws and required to find evidence before somebody could be convicted. I am not a dictator. This is from the horse's mouth. From the president, illegal president of Guyana, saying he's not a dictator. Well, in fact, how do you describe a dictator? What is the definition of a dictator? Dictator is someone who doesn't obey the law. A dictator is someone who is above the rule of law. And what is the rule of law? What enshrined the rule of law is the Constitution. So here he says, I'm not a dictator. But the definition of a dictator has to do with a person who feels that they're above the supreme law of the country, the Constitution, above the laws of the country, above rule of law. And he is a dictator. And he's also illegal. So Mr. Granger has been trying to do some, what you call crisis damage control. Damage control. The government outreaches, by the way, and this goes back to his comment about his inclusive ideology. We have information and have on record, including video footage, that the government outreach is nothing but political campaigning, where people are told to vote for Granger and the APNU AFC unapologetically. These are government ministers. This is not political campaign. They're wearing their party colors. They're going on government outreaches, supposedly to meet the people, and also then at each meeting, they tell the people they must vote for Granger and APNU. Of course, my dear friends, they make promises of roads and bridges and schools, etc., when they win. Some have been threatened by ministers that if they don't vote for them, their community will get nothing. And this was used in the local government election, by the way, as well. We have on footage them going to Amerindian areas, of course asking them to vote for them, telling them to vote for them, and warning people and intimidating people that if they vote for the PPP and the PPP wins, there will be war in Guyana. This is terrifying people. But this is what is being done by the government outreaches, ministers, including when Mr. Granger is there. They're telling the Amerindian communities, if the PPP wins, there will be war. And of course, I just have to refer to the Linden rally for the 67th anniversary, which I've referred to many times before, promising people 500 house lots in the 2020 election, when in fact Linden is going down and down all the time. The economy there has been having serious trouble. And where are all the house lots that they promised in the 2015 election? Why has that number been reduced to 500? And of course, I referred to in the previous program about the amount of land that's been given out, 30,000 acres of land, of which a large chunk of it is in Region 10. And guess who? To the APNU supporters and cronies and leaders, but not to the ordinary Lindeners. These are to a number of people, including the Chief Elections Officer, Mr. Lowenfield, and ministers of the government and ministers' children of the government. So, in spite of the CCJ ruling, stating that the government has restricted legal authority, despite that, and despite the fact that the government is doing everything against that, Mr. Granger says he's a lawful president. And this is a joke, but a horrible joke on the Guyanese people. I've spoken repeatedly of the billions of taxpayers' money being spent to finance the APNU AFC campaign. And I've given examples of this on the program. We estimate approximately $30 million have been spent so far, including the purchases of campaign paraphernalia using the state machinery, all of which are our money, the taxpayers' money. And of course, Mr. Clean, as he tries to portray himself by his party, and all of this does nothing to stop the pillage of our country's resources. I have spoken about corruption. I've given you cases and studies and examples, and right now we're reaching almost 100 cases of corruption. But we won't deal with that today. And Mr. Granger obviously feels that this is not a problem since he is against corruption. And of course, he's a lawful president, not a dictator. So that all of these things, the 2015 campaign of APNU AFC has been unmasked as being based on lies and broken promises. And that is why now they're hustling to go to the communities, where the president, in his own interview with Mosley, apologetically says that he hasn't been going out as much in the last 4 years, but he will be in this period going out and people will see him. But the people are saying, where have the APNU AFC ministers been? Not only did they not come to PVP areas, only now since the no confidence motion in some areas, but they haven't been to their own supporters' areas, which Mr. Granger says he's taking care of them, and he will take care of them. As we're coming down in the program, let me just remind you, how many more days for elections, my dear friends? Today, October 31st, there are 123 days, or 4 months and 3 days left before March the 2nd, 2020, election day. And it's therefore important that people, I repeat it on this program, go and collect their national ID cards. Some people have died. If you have the death certificates, take those in. If they're persons that are 14 years and up, who may have registered and didn't collect their ID cards, they should go and collect it, even though they are not voters. So those between 14 and, say, 17 and a half, 18, who may not have collected their ID cards, please go and do so, because it's important that you have that on your own and that GCOM isn't allowed to just suddenly strike off names from the list. As I said, let us be vigilant and ensure that we have free and fair elections. We're in a very serious and decisive time. 123 days will fly by. We have Christmas, we have Humanabi, we have MASH. All these things occupy our time. But right now, our focus is on the claims and objection, making sure people are on the list. People have to do transfers. And we are scrutinizing the house-to-house list. And we're concerned about the large numbers of new people on the list that are not on the PLE, but also have not gone in to make transactions, have not gone in to the GCOM centers in the regions to make claims or transfers or any action. As I showed you in the beginning with the figures from GCOM, that it is a small number of new people, 3,924, and in fact, it's Mr. Jagde who had said, when the whole debate was going on prior to the house-to-house registration starting, that how many new people are we talking about? 4,000? It's only a certain percentage of the list. And so we're seeing in some areas some rather unusual names, large numbers of people in the house-to-house who were not in the PLE. And as I said, neither have they gone in the claims objection period to get themselves put on the PLE. So as I said, we are nervous and concerned about what GCOM is going to do with this house-to-house list that they've stuck up all over the place. This is of concern. And we are finding, again, as the PVP press release said, which I read parts of it earlier to you, that there are names of persons who are under the age of 18. There are names of persons there who are not living in the areas where they're listed. And this is now new people. Remember, house-to-house was only a few months ago. And unlike claims and objection, where you have to go in to make a claim or transfer, house-to-house is when GCOM came to you and they registered all the people in your house. So if you find a dead person on the list for GCOM who died prior to the house-to-house registration, how is that possible? Did they meet a ghost when they went to the house? So there can't be anybody on that house-to-house who died prior to the date of the beginning of the house-to-house exercise, which was aborted. Cannot be. Because GCOM had to come physically to your house, sit down, take all your data, look at your birth certificate, take your prints, take your photograph. All of that to be done. And so, if we find those who are underage, how is that possible? GCOM people who went are supposed to have known that the qualifying date was December 31st, 2019. So anyone born before 2001 was out. Just simple mathematics. And so we are busy. And if you wish to volunteer, please call the Freedom House and you wish to volunteer to help out, checking the list in your areas, the house-to-house people. We are cross-matching and finding thousands and thousands of persons who are not on the PLE. And that's why I go back to what I said earlier and what Mr. Jagdeo said. The two scenarios. One is to create a situation where they will challenge the results of the election in March 22nd, of course, if they don't win, and or to disenfranchise thousands of people so that the balance of the voters will shift in their favor. As time proceeds, we will have a clearer notion of which option they're really going to. And knowing the PNC, they tend to be greedy. They want to have both options because they want to make sure that they win completely and that if they don't win, then they will go to cause trouble. And so we have to be very, very vigilant. Someone had called these elections the mother of all elections, just like in 2008, the house-to-house, the first national house-to-house registration, which took almost a year to do, was called the mother of all registrations because this is where the database of GCOM was completely recreated with names of persons that people were visited in their house and recorded and registered. And after that, every 6 months, continuous registration where names were continually added. And so this is almost like the mother of all of elections for us, that this will determine the path our country takes. Will we be going down a path of development, restoring this country that has been floundering under the PNC, APNU AFC leadership? Or will it be under the APNU AFC leadership, which will take us down further? The problem when you listen to the interview with Mr. Granger is that, as I've said on this program before, he and his cabinet appear to be delusional. They're not in touch with the people. They're not clear on what has to be done to move this country forward. It's a lot of fluff, it's a lot of generalities, and it's unfortunate because in 2015, they inherited a country that had showed 8 years consecutive growth and was the second country in the whole of Latin America to have achieved that. Now, not in Latin America, the Americas, which is Canada, United States, all the way through Central America, all the way through South America. We had showed that. In addition to that, we had over $700 million US in our foreign currency reserves. What is it now? 300,000? Where's the money gone, guys? And also, we're $70 billion in overdraft. The government is $70 billion overdraft in the Bank of Guyana. So who really knows? Do they really know how to run this country? 4.5 years was enough of an experience to know that the APNU AFC government, whether led by Granger or anybody else, cannot run the country. We're going to give them a second term, as some people are saying, another 5 years of this. Well, the country would then become really in trouble, and that would be seriously, the levels of poverty would be much worse than they are now. And we'd be going back to where we were in 1985 to 1992. We don't want to go back. We want to go forward. This country must go forward, and we, the people, have the responsibility to take our country forward and not backward. And all those who supported the APNU AFC and were fooled or feel embarrassed that they were fooled, or that they still believe what the APNU AFC said, but they're punishing. Think about it. Do you want to move forward? Do you want progress? Or do you want promises? Do you want to see the removal of the VAT taxes so that you can have a little more purchasing power than you had in the last 4 years? These are things that are bread and butter issues for the voter to choose. Which do you wish? For us, when the elections are held on March the 2nd, we in the PPC government believe that we shall have to start all over again, as in 1992, to reconstruct, to put this economy back on a firm and stable footing and restore the programs which help the poor and vulnerable and those at risk, and restore the independence of the judiciary and the legislature from executive interference, and of course, protect rule of law, democracy, and stand by our Constitution. You have a wonderful weekend. You take care of yourselves. Remember, don't drink and drive. We'll see each other again next Thursday right here on Matters of Public Importance. The numbers to call again, if you need help with the list and where you are on the list, 231-1133, 231-1148, 231-5401, and WhatsApp 611-7772. Thank you very much. As I said, have a wonderful weekend and stay well, take care of yourselves. We'll see each other on Thursday. Bye-bye. Ta-ta.
Attention anyone on Medicare. The